Okay, so this is a pretty special video. There are 17 halls here at Loughborough University and I'm going to be putting them into a tier list. So if you're thinking about coming here, you can base your decisions off my opinions, and if you're a current student, then you can just use this as entertainment. I'll be basing it off many factors such as general reputation, cost, location, how they perform in IMS sports. So we might as well get started. Alphabetical order, Butler Court is up first, and well, Butler Court is very small and its location is a bit meh. It's on the east park of the campus. It's right next to Towers, which is straight away a negative. You're near the power-based gym, you're near the design school, you're near the rugby pitch, but if you're in engineering, you've got a bit of trouble. Just as a heads up, I will be basing the prices off the prices for the standard room, and then you can work out how that is relative to other halls. So the price for a standard room at Butler Court is around £125 per week, which is one of the cheapest. They are self-catered, so you have to take that into account with the price. But they do offer deluxe rooms, and I believe they're the only hall that offer deluxe rooms out of the university. And these are very big rooms, 4-foot bed, everything you want, ensuite. But that's only if you can afford it, right? But if I'm going to be honest with you, I'm almost halfway through my time here at Loughborough now. I'm halfway through my second year, and I have never, ever met someone from Butler Court. As far as I know, I'm convinced they do not exist. The people I know who play for Butler Court IMS aren't actually in Butler Court, they're from other halls. And talking about their IMS, they are absolutely terrible. But they're actually not the worst, which we'll get onto later, but with all that information, Butler Court is going into D tier. And they're not quite F tier because there's nothing else to say about them, that they're not very good, but they are pretty cheap. And I guess if they do exist, it's a pretty good option. Moving on to Kaye. Now, Kaye is a catered hall. It's a decent sized hall and it's part of the village halls. There's 4 main village halls, which is Royce, Kaye, Rutherford, Faraday. I think this is the best location for halls on the whole campus. You're in the middle. Whatever you're doing, you're going to be the same distance from everywhere. Nothing is more than 10-15 minutes away. I think it's brilliant. So that's a pretty good start for Kaye. And then to add to this, they have 3 meals a day, 5 days a week, Monday to Friday, catered hall. Obviously, being catered knocks the price up a little bit. We're looking at about £180 per week. But as catered halls goes, that's one on the cheaper side. It's certainly a good option. When it comes to IMS, they're a bit boring. They're a bit mid at sport, I would say. And then compared to the others like Royce, Faraday, Rutherford, I'd say some of the others are a bit better, but we'll get onto that. So Kaye, I'd say, are a solid B tier. Now onto a big one, the famous one, Claudia Parsons, CP. When you come here on an open day or something like that on a tour, you're always going to see CP because it's a really nice looking hall. Plus it's where a lot of the performance athletes go. However, it is self-catered, and it is about £210 per week, so it is expensive. That is the price for standard rooms, but every standard room in Claudia Parsons has a 4-foot bed, so I guess that knocks up the price a little bit. I still don't know if that justifies £210 a week though for self-catered. It's definitely one of the more luxury halls, and look, if you can afford it, then it's certainly a good place. Great location, you're right next to the athletic centre, right next to the first team hockey pitch, and right pretty much near all the sports pitches. Pretty close to the Union, not far away from the power base. It's a good hall, we have to admit it. And for that reason, it's the first one to go into A tier, so well done CP. But I will say something, despite it being the sporty hall, when it comes to IMS, they're pretty shit. But we'll move on from that. DC, David Collett. Now this is our first half and half catered hall. It's pretty big, and we're looking at more of the West Park as a location, so it's closer to the engineering stuff, closer to the Holywell side of the campus. So if you're going to the Holywell gym, if you're going to be an engineering student, then this is a decent option. It's about £160 per week, and this is for 2 meals a day, 5 days a week. So a breakfast and an evening meal, so no lunch. So you have 2 options there. You either pay for your own lunch, or you stack up on breakfast, stack up on dinner, and completely skip lunch. Up to you. But obviously cheaper than places like Kaye, which are catered 3 meals a day. I didn't know this. Apparently it has multiple common rooms, and from what I've seen, the common rooms look pretty good. I also hope when it comes to the breakfast, they're not limited to their eggs and bacon and whatever. I'm sure there is a limit, but the limit's a lot bigger than it is here in Royce and other halls around here. I was speaking to someone from DC and was like, yeah, I get 4 eggs, 4 sausages, scrambled eggs. I was like, okay, but they don't let us do that here. When it comes to sport, they're pretty mid at sport. If you see you've got DC coming up on the weekend, you don't think, oh shit. You kind of think to yourself, okay, this is a game we can win. But they're not bad, and that's fair to say. So overall, especially for a cheaper catered hall, I think DC is pretty good, and it's going to go into B tier. Elvin Richards. It's big, it looks nice, the location is good, but it's expensive. It's about £240 a week. Not cheap. From my opinion, they have the best IMS kit in Loughborough, lovely black and green. There are some absolute shockers. Actually, DC have one of the worst kits, but don't let that sway your decision. For £240 per week, you get the same amount of meals as you would in DC. So you get 2 meals a day, 5 days a week, 10 meals in a week. That is absolutely criminal. You do get an ensuite and a 4-foot bed in every single room. So if you're willing to push the extra money for that, then it could be an option for you. But in my opinion, it's just a posh DC. And for that reason, it will go into B tier because they are pretty good at IMS Sport, but it's definitely below DC. Falk Eggington next. Well, Falk Egg it's a little bit out of it, but it's still in the campus, so you're still in around the area. It is a bit of a weird location, but I will say they are the cheapest hall. They are under £120 a week, self-catered. But the biggest thing about Falk Egg is they're the only hall that doesn't have a wash basin in the standard room. So every time you want to brush your teeth, every time you want to wash your hands, every time you want to wash your face, every time you want to take a piss, well, you have to go into a shared area to do that, which is a bit awkward. If that doesn't bother you and you want self-catered hall and you want a cheap option, Falk Egg is a pretty good option for you. But I think I would get a bit fed up with that at times, you know. For me, that really lets it down. The location not being the greatest as well, not being in and around other halls, lets it down as well. So Falk Egg, it's not as bad as Butler Court, so it's our first C tier. Faraday next. Wow. It's a decent sized hall. It's in the village area. Fantastic location, as I said earlier, with Kaye. In fact, it's the same price as Kaye, about £180 per week for a standard room. Obviously, that comes with the same system. 3 meals a day, 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. And they are very good at sport. I have to say, Faraday are very good at sport. They came second in the overall rankings last year. So especially if you're someone who's wanting a catered hall, Faraday could be a great option. You know, you can't really go wrong. You've got a good location, got good value for money. And I would give it A tier, but you've got to remember it's Faraday. So unfortunately, it's F tier. Moving on. Harry French. Harry French is about £135 per week, so nicely on the cheaper side, but it is the first hall that we've covered that is completely out of campus. Harry French is also weirdly split into 2 bits. They're not too far away from each other, but I've heard that one bit is much better than the other bit, and obviously you don't know which bit you're going to get. Maybe there's a differential in the rooms between the 2 areas, I'm not sure. But they're pretty good at sport. I remember they beat us in the Bees Football Cup last year. So that still hurts. A good side of Harry French is that they are closer to town, but you're further away from the campus, and especially if you're engineering or you want to go to the Holywell gym, it's a far way. It's a long way. And you might think to yourself, well, that's all right, I'll take the bus. But you've got to remember, around lecture times, the bus gets very busy. But overall, I think I put Harry French in B tier, just about, but it's between B and C tier. That might change later. Hazelrigg-Rutland or Rig-Rut, it might be the oldest hall, don't quote me on that, but certainly the oldest area of the university, one of the most picturesque areas of the university. That central area near the Students' Union is Hazelrigg and Rutland, which were the 2 original university buildings. And it is the smallest hall. It's got the least amount of rooms, which means you might have a nice little community there. It's relatively expensive, about £200 per week, but that includes an ensuite and a 4-foot bed, so once again, does it make up for it? That's up to you to decide. I'd say a below average IMS. If you draw Rig-Rut in the cup, you're not going to be worried about it too much. It is self-catered, so going back to that CP problem, around £200 for self-catered, that's quite a lot of money. They are relatively new halls in a decent location as well, kind of behind the village centre, so you've kind of got the same distance between areas. It's a decent area. And really, that's all there is to say about Rig-Rut. I think it's just a solid C tier. John Phillips. Well, this is mainly for postgraduates. It's self-catered. It's the exact same price as Rig-Rut. It's pretty much in the same area. It's just like a postgraduate Rig-Rut. I don't know if it's strictly only for postgraduates. I don't think it is, but it's very rare for undergraduates to go there. Probably I'd say the biggest problem with John Phillips is they don't have an IMS team. They don't compete in the IMS sports. And for that reason, it is a lot worse than Rig-Rut, and I'd say it's D tier. But look, if you're a postgraduate student, it's probably not something you're going to be focused on too much, and John Phillips could be a decent option. Robert Bakewell, well, it's the same price as Rig-Rut and John Phillips. and it's kind of the same sort of story, self-catered, ensuite, full for bed. Location wise, there's a slight differential. It's pushing more towards that West Park side, more away from the village area. Similar to Rig-Rut, it's got a pretty decent IMS, probably better IMS than Rig-Rut. Because it's pretty big and because it's not directly in the centre, I'd say it's not quite good as Rig-Rut, but still makes its way into C tier. Next is Royce. Now Royce is the hall that I stayed in last year and I'm staying in this year, which might explain why Faraday is in F tier. It's the same as Faraday and Kaye in the sense that it's 3 meals a day, 5 days a week, about £180 for a standard room. The same as the other two, it's bang in the centre of campus, great location, brilliant place to be. Royce have a very good IMS, sadly not as good as Faraday. We came 3rd in the overall rankings last year. I have to say it is one of the worst common rooms. The pool table has got so many rips in it, the queues are ruined. We have a dartboard to be fair, but last year we didn't have one. And we have a ping pong table, which is pretty good. But apart from the common room, it's a really good area. It's got a good community around Royce. And honestly, if I was completely unbiased, I would give Royce A tier. It's a great hall for this area. I'd say it beats the others such as Faraday, Kaye and Rutherford as the other 4 options, or other 3 options. But as we can tell with Faraday, this list isn't completely unbiased. And for that reason, Royce sit in S tier, up the Royce. Next is Rutherford. Well, Rutherford is the last one out of these 4 in the village centre, and it has the same characteristics. It's catered 3 meals a day, 5 days a week, about £180 for a standard room per week, and it also is a great location. But obviously some of these have to be better than others. Even with an unbiased opinion, I would say that Rutherford is the worst out of the 4. If I was picking out of the 4, I'd personally have Rutherford as my last pick. I think what really sticks out about Rutherford is they've got a pretty poor IMS. There's nothing really else to say. I just don't think they're as good as the others. And for that reason, Rutherford sits pretty solidly in C tier. Moving on to probably the biggest hall, it's Telford. It's self-catered, it's a good price, £130 per week. Obviously we know Faraday was 2nd in the overall rankings, Royce were 3rd in the overall rankings, Telford every year are 1st in the overall IMS rankings, so they are the best hall for sport, and a lot of the reason for that is they are the biggest. I have heard stories about things being stolen in Telford, but I expect that happens all over the place. But if you have common sense and lock your room, then you should be okay. It seems to me there's a good culture around Telford despite being a big hall. It's a great location as well. It's just outside the village centre, basically right next to Royce and Faraday, right next to the library. It's quite a large stretch, as I said, it's quite a big hall. If you want that great location but you're not looking for a catered hall, you're looking for self-catered, I'd say Telford is probably your best option, especially with the value for money. And for that reason, Telford sits pretty well in A tier. Next is Towers. Yeah, Towers is the only hall that is catered on weekends as well as weekdays, so it's catered 3 meals a day, 7 days a week. It's about £195 per week for a standard room, which is pretty good value for money seeing that you're catered every day. It's the same as Butler Court with the location, you're right next to the power base. But apart from that, if you're in the engineering side, it's not the best place to be. But I have to say this, and I have to be honest with you, Towers is the worst building on campus. I am convinced when people come here on open days and then they see Towers, they think to themselves, actually, I'm not going to go to Loughborough. It is an absolute eyesore, and I'm telling you, Loughborough will be much higher on the UK university rankings if they just got rid of it. Student satisfaction falls just because we have to look at it every day. Plus, they are absolutely shit at IMS. They are one of the worst halls for sport. The only positive I can say about it is if you are living in Towers, you don't have to look at Towers when you're inside it. I think we all know where Towers is going. It's F tier. Getting to the end now, the Holt. Now, the Holt is the other hall that is completely out of campus like Harry French, and it is even further out of campus than Harry French. Also, they somehow finished last in the IMS rankings last year, and when you've got Butler Court in that competition, that is a pretty impressive achievement. It's about £160 a week for self-catered, so not the best choice. There are better self-catered options. Like Telford, for example, and other ones that we've mentioned, but you do get a 4-foot bed for a standard room, so that's great, I guess. Also, there's a lot of different room options. It is a completely unique hall. It looks completely different to any other hall, but you have to remember it's the furthest away from campus, and because of its poor IMS record, I think the Holt is a solid D tier. Then finally with Bilmo. Bilmo is kind of off campus, but it's like you just cross a road and it's hardly off campus. It's absolutely fine. It's a very big hall actually. I didn't realise how big it is. It's self-catered and about £145 a week for a standard room, and that standard room includes a 4-foot bed, so you can already see this is a better option than the Holt. Some would say it's just a more expensive Telford with bigger beds, and that would be fair enough. If you're into the partying scene, it is right next to the Union. You're about a minute walk away from the Student Union. I think it has a pretty good party culture at Bilmo. Also, it's a pretty good hall for sport. Overall, especially for someone who's into that scene at university, Bilmo is a very good option, and I'd say it's well and truly in B tier. But obviously this isn't enough. They're currently sitting in alphabetical order according to their rank, and we're going to quickly rearrange them so you can see which one I think is better than others. First of all, S tier, well there's only one in S tier, the greatest hall in Loughborough Uni, Royce Hall. A tier has got CP and Telford. Well, they are completely different halls. I'd say CP just nicks it because it's a much better looking hall. The location, they are different locations, but it really depends on what you're doing, what you want to do. If you really want to play sport at IMS level, I'd recommend Telford. If you really want a cheaper self-catered experience, I'd recommend Telford. But if you're all right spending the money and you want a bit more of a luxury time, then CP is probably the better option. So I'm going to leave it like that for now. Section B does need some rearranging. First of all, I want to put Bilmo at the top of this. I rate Bilmo pretty highly as a hall. I think it's good value for money despite it being self-catered. It's a decent location as well, near the Union. You can see it's got that culture behind it. I'd say Bilmo sits at the top of B tier. I think Harry French are definitely at the bottom of B tier. They're really between B and C, but I'd say they just nick B tier, as I said earlier. DC can go second. Elvin's just a rich DC, so if you want the more luxury rooms, then you can go for Elvin, but I think for that reason you get better value for money with DC. And then Kaye Hall's a pretty solid one for these 4 in the village area, so Kaye can sit there. So that shows the top 8. I also think C tier might need some rearranging. I'll put Rigger top of C tier, I think. I like the idea of it being a small community. I think some students might like that. Also, as I said, their location's pretty good. I think Falk Egg's got to go bottom. Despite it being the cheapest hall, it's a little bit out there with the location. You're not near any other halls. That might not bother you, but what I think would bother you is the fact you have no wash basin in your room. I personally wouldn't like that very much at all. So despite it being the cheapest, I think it goes bottom of C tier. I think Bakewell can sit above Rutherford. Bakewell does have the bit more of a luxury rooms. The Bakewell rooms are really nice, but I think what just drops it into C tier is it's a little bit further away from the centre, and students might not like that so much. But the difference between Bakewell and Rigger is hardly anything. Well, D tier, well these are the true halls at the bottom. I think John Phillips can go to the top of D tier, and the reason is it's pretty harmless. There's not much wrong with John Phillips. It's pretty much the same as Rigger and Bakewell, apart from the fact it has no IMS team, which really knocks it down. If they did compete in IMS and they did have a decent IMS team, I could see it sitting nicely in C tier. Then to deal with the other two, Butler Court and the Holt, I think the Holt is so far away from the campus that it's got to be bottom of D tier, and especially the fact that they sat below them on the IMS rankings. I couldn't believe that when I found that out, seeing as how bad Butler Court are. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that, and F tier can stay as it is. Towers can definitely finish last. And that's it. That is my overall Loughborough Halls tier list. Look, there's a bit of joking around here and there of the tier list, but I hope that the main information of each hall has been delivered across to you. Obviously, your own preferences are going to change, whether you want self-catered, whether you're fussed about the cost of the hall. Depends what type of room you want as well. If you know where you're going to be studying, then you might want to be closer to West Park or East Park. And to be completely honest with you, all halls are absolutely fine, apart from Towers. And maybe you might want to avoid the ones that are slightly out of campus if that really affects you. But overall, I hope this video has been useful. I hope it's been entertaining. And look, put your own opinions in the comments below if you're a student here at Loughborough Uni. And also, if you're coming to Loughborough Uni, feel free to ask any questions in the comments below, or DM me on Instagram, which will also be in the description. I also do a newsletter every single week. You can find that in the description as well. Overall, I hope you've enjoyed the video. Please subscribe here if you're new, and I'll see you all next week. Goodbye.